Welcome to my channel. Let me ask you a simple question. Have you ever learned a new English word today, felt happy about it, and then completely forgotten it tomorrow? Why does this happen? Are you bad at English? Is your memory weak? Or is there a hidden reason nobody talks about? Today, I am going to show you why people forget words. What mistakes most learners make every day, and how you can start remembering words much more easily. Make sure you stay until the end, because the last secret may completely change the way you learn English forever. Chapter 1. One day, a student came to me with a sad face. He sat down and said, "Teacher, I have a problem." I asked him, "What is your problem?" He said, "Every day I learn new English words. Call. I write them in my notebook. I read them again and again. I even repeat them many times. But after a few days, I forget almost all of them. Why does this happen to me?" I smiled because I had heard this question hundreds of times before. In fact, many English learners around the world ask the same question every day. Maybe you are asking the same question right now. Oh? Maybe yesterday you learned 10 new words. Maybe today you can remember only 3 or 4 of them. And because of this, you feel frustrated. You feel like your memory is weak. You feel like English is too difficult. Some learners even start believing that they are not smart enough to learn English. But what if I told you that forgetting words is completely normal? What if I told you that forgetting words does not mean you are bad at English? In fact, forgetting is something every human being does every day. Let me explain. 2. Imagine that you walk into a room and see hundreds of objects. There are chairs, tables, books, bags, pens, pictures, and many other things. Can you remember every single detail a week later? Probably not. Your brain does not keep everything. It chooses what is important and what is not. This is how the brain works. It is actually trying to help you. If your brain remembered every little thing forever, it would become overloaded. So your brain is always asking one question. Is this information important? Okay? If the answer is no, the brain slowly removes it. This is exactly what happens with English words. Many learners see a new word once or twice and then never use it again. The brain thinks, this word is not important, and slowly forgets it. I remember another student who wanted to improve his vocabulary quickly. He learned 50 new words every week. He worked very hard. Every evening he sat at his desk and studied for hours. At first he felt proud. He was making great progress. But 1 month later he came back to me and said, "Teacher, I can only remember a few of those words." He was disappointed. He thought he had wasted his time. But I told him something that surprised him. I said, "The problem is not your memory. The problem is that you are expecting your brain to remember words that it barely knows. Think about your best friend. Did you become best friends after meeting once? Of course not. You spent time together. You had conversations. You shared experiences. Slowly, the friendship became stronger. Words are exactly the same. A, a word becomes your friend only after you meet it many times. The first time you see a word, it is a stranger. The second time, it is still a stranger. But after seeing it again and again in stories, conversations, videos, and daily life, it becomes familiar. Then one day it becomes part of your vocabulary. This is why forgetting is not failure. Bet. Forgetting is part of learning. Even native speakers forget words. Sometimes, even teachers forget words. Even people with excellent memories forget information they do not use. So, if you forget a word today, do not panic. Do not think you are bad at English. Do not compare yourself with others. Instead, understand what is happening. Your brain is simply waiting for proof that the word is important. And here is something interesting. By the end of this video, you will discover that the people who remember words easily are not people with magical memories. They are people who understand how memory works. Right. They know a simple secret that most learners never learn. And when you discover that secret, your entire approach to learning English may change forever. Ever. So now the big question is this. If forgetting is normal, why do some learners remember words so much better than others? In the next chapter, we are going to uncover one of the biggest mistakes English learners make every single day, and once you see it, you may never study vocabulary the same way again. Chapter 2. Now, let me tell you about one of the biggest mistakes English learners make. This mistake is so common that millions of people do it every day. Without realizing it, a few years ago, I had a student named Ahmed. He was one of the hardest working students I had ever met. Every morning he opened his notebook and memorized long vocabulary lists. Every evening he reviewed them again. His notebook was full of English words and translations. When I looked at his notebook, I was impressed. There were hundreds of words, written neatly on every page. One day I asked him, Ahmed, how many of these words can you use in a conversation right now? He looked at me for a moment and then smiled nervously. Mal, Cole. He started speaking, but after a few seconds he became silent. He knew the words when he looked at his notebook, but he could not remember them when he needed them. Does this sound familiar? Maybe you have done the same thing. Maybe you have a notebook full of vocabulary. Maybe you have saved hundreds of English words on your phone. Maybe you have watched vocabulary videos every day. But when someone asks you a simple question in English, the words suddenly disappear. Why does this happen? The answer may surprise you. The problem is not that you are learning words. The problem is how you are learning them. Many learners treat words like objects that must be collected. They learn a word, write it down, memorize the meaning, and then move on to the next word. But language does not work like that. Imagine that I introduce you to a person named John. Ank. You shake his hand for 5 seconds and then leave. 1 year later, will you remember him clearly? Probably not. But what if you spent time with John every week? What if you talked to him, laughed with him, worked with him, and shared experiences with him? Then you would remember him very easily. Words work exactly the same way. You cannot build a relationship with a word by seeing it once. You must spend time with it. You must use it. You must hear it. You must read it. You must speak it. Kai? I remember another student who learned the word journey. She memorized the meaning and wrote it in her notebook. 3 days later, she forgot it. Then I asked her to tell me about her journey to school every morning. She started using the word again and again. A week later, she still remembered it. A month later, she still remembered it. Why? Because the word was no longer just a word. It had become part of her life. This is the secret many learners never discover. The brain loves meaning. The brain loves experiences. The brain loves stories. But the brain does not love random information. That is why you can remember a funny story from your childhood even after many years. That is why you can remember the lyrics of a song you love. That is why you can remember the name of your favorite movie. Your brain remembers things that have meaning and emotion attached to them. Ming. I once asked a class to memorize 10 random words. Most students forgot them within a few days. Then I asked them to create a short story using those same words. Bop. Hey. A week later, most of them still remembered almost every word. The words had become part of a story, and stories are easier for the brain to remember. Okay. This is why simply reading vocabulary lists is often not enough. If you want to remember a word, bring it into your life. Use it when speaking. Use it when writing. Use it when thinking in English. Create a sentence about yourself. Create a funny story. Connect the word to a real experience. The more connections you create, the stronger the memory becomes. And here's something very important. Many learners think successful English speakers have better memories. That is not true. Most successful learners simply use words more often. They turn words into experiences. They turn vocabulary into real communication. That is why the words stay in their minds for a long time. Tänken. But now another question appears. If using words helps us remember them, why does the brain still delete so many words that we learn? What is happening inside our minds? In the next chapter, we are going to discover something fascinating about the human brain. You will learn why your brain acts like a filter, why it removes information, and how you can make it keep English words much longer than ever before. Hey. Chapter 3. A few years ago, one of my students came to me with a notebook full of English words. Every page was covered with vocabulary. He looked very confident and said, "Teacher, this time I am serious. King, I have written down hundreds of words. I will never forget them." I smiled and wished him good luck. A few weeks later, he came back looking confused. Ho. He opened the same notebook and pointed at many words. "Teacher," he said, "I know I studied these words before, but now they look completely new to me. It feels like my brain has deleted them." Have you ever felt this way? Have you ever learned a word and then suddenly forgotten it, as if it never existed? If your answer is yes, then you are not alone. In fact, this happens to almost every English learner. But today I want to tell you something important. Your brain is not working against you. Your brain is actually doing exactly what it was designed to do. Let me explain. Imagine you plant a small seed in the ground. On the first day, you are excited. You put the seed into the soil and hope it will become a beautiful tree. But then you never water it. You never give it sunlight. You never take care of it. What will happen? The seed will never grow. The same thing happens with new English words. Every new word you learn is like a tiny seed. Full. The day you learn it, the seed enters your mind. But if you never see that word again, never hear it again, never speak it again, and never use it again, your brain assumes it is not important. Slowly, the memory becomes weaker and weaker until it disappears. One student once told me, "Teacher, I watched an English movie 6 months ago, and I still remember some of the funny lines." I asked him, "Why do you think you remember them?" He thought for a moment and then said, "Because they made me laugh." Exactly. The brain loves things that are repeated, meaningful, or emotional. Think about your favorite song. Oh. You probably remember many of the lyrics. Why? Because you heard them again and again. Think about a funny joke someone told you years ago. You still remember it because it stayed in your mind. The brain keeps information that returns often. It throws away information that disappears. I once had a student who learned the word journey. On Monday, he wrote it in his notebook. On Tuesday, he saw it in a story. On Wednesday, he heard it in a video. On Thursday, he used it while speaking. On Friday, he wrote a sentence with it. A month later, he still remembered the word perfectly. Another student learned the same word on Monday, but never saw it again. A month later, he had completely forgotten it. The difference was not intelligence. The difference was repetition. Many learners think they must learn more and more words every day. They are always chasing new vocabulary. But successful learners can't be. They know that seeing the same word many times is often more powerful than learning 10 new words once. I remember when I was learning English myself. Sometimes I would see the same word in a book, then hear it in a conversation, then find it in. At first, I did not realize what was happening. but slowly that word became part of me. I no longer had to think about it. It came naturally. This is how vocabulary grows, not through one meeting, but through many meetings. Think about the people you know in your life. The people you see every day are the people you remember best. Words work exactly the same way. The more often you meet a word, the stronger your connection becomes. Hey, this is why reviewing vocabulary is so important. This is why reading, listening, and speaking regularly help so much. Every time you see a word again, you are telling your brain, this word matters. Please keep it. And your brain listens. But there is something even more interesting. There is a special type of memory that is far more powerful than simple repetition. Okay. It can make a word stay in your mind for years. It can turn an ordinary word into an unforgettable word. And most learners never use this secret. In the next chapter, we are going to discover how emotions can become your greatest weapon for remembering English. Vocabulary, and why some words stay with you forever. When bit, while others disappear within days. King, Chapter 4. One day, a student came into my classroom laughing. I asked him, "Why are you laughing so much?" He smiled and said, "Teacher, I made a very funny mistake today." I asked him what happened. He said, "I wanted to tell someone that I was excited, but instead I used the wrong word and said something completely different." Everyone laughed, including me. Then he surprised me. He remembered that word perfectly even months later. He remembered the correct word. He remembered the wrong word. He remembered the entire situation. That day, I realized once again how powerful emotions are when it comes to memory. Let me ask you a question. Can you remember something embarrassing that happened years ago? Can you remember a moment when you were very happy, very excited, or very surprised? Most people can. In fact, many people can remember small details from emotional moments, even after many years. But they cannot remember a word they studied yesterday from a vocabulary list. Why does this happen? The answer is simple. Our brain, when something makes us laugh, smile, feel nervous, excited, surprised, or even embarrassed, the brain pays special attention. It says, "This is important. Keep this memory." Heck. That is why emotional experiences often stay with us for a very long time. I remember a student who struggled with vocabulary for years. Every week she learned new words, but she forgot most of them. One day I told her, "Stop trying to memorize words like a machine. Start connecting them to your life." She looked confused, so I gave her an example. I told her to take the word celebrate. Oh. Instead of simply writing the definition, I asked her to think about her last birthday. I asked her to remember the cake, the friends, the laughter, and the happy moments. Yo, Then I asked her to create a sentence using the word. Suddenly, the word was no longer just a word. It became part of a real memory. Weeks later, she still remembered it perfectly. Another student loved football. Whenever he learned a new English word, he connected it to football. If he learned the word victory, he thought about his favorite team winning an important match. If he learned the word disappointed, he remembered a game his team lost. Because these words were connected to strong feelings, they stayed in his memory much longer. Okay. This is something many learners never understand. They try to learn words without giving them any meaning. They treat words like numbers on a page, but the brain does not work that way. The brain loves stories. The brain loves emotions. The brain loves experiences. I once knew a student who learned the word terrified. He could never remember it. Then one day he watched a scary movie. After the movie, he laughed and said, "Teacher, now I understand what terrified means." He never forgot the word again. Why? Because he felt it. The word became connected to an emotion. Cake. The same thing happens in everyday life. Think about the English words you remember best. Frick. Many of them are probably connected to a special moment, a funny story, a favorite movie, a song, or an important conversation. Those emotional connections make words stronger in your memory. It's great. This is why I always tell my students to create personal stories with new vocabulary. If you learn the word journey, think about a trip you took. Yay? If you learn the word success, think about a moment when you achieved something important. If you learn the word friendship, think about your best friend. The more personal the connection, the stronger the memory becomes. One day, a student asked me, "Teacher, does this really work?" I smiled and said, "Let me ask you something. Quing. Do you remember the name of every person you met last year?" He said no. Then I asked, "Do you remember the names of the people who changed your life?" He immediately said yes. Okay. That is because emotions create stronger memories. Words are no different. When you connect a word to a feeling, a story, or an experience, you make it much harder to forget. But here is where things become even more interesting. Many learners believe that learning more words every day will help them become fluent faster. They try to learn 20, 30, or even 50 words daily. However, what if I told you that learning fewer words could actually help you remember more? What if the real problem is not that you are learning too little, but that you are trying to learn too much? In the next chapter, we are going to discover why many hardworking learners accidentally make this mistake. And how a simpler approach can help words stay in your memory much longer. Chapter 5. One day, two students came to me with the same goal. Both wanted to improve their English vocabulary. Both were hardworking. Both were motivated, but they had completely different study methods. The first student was very ambitious. Every morning he would learn 30 new words. He carried a notebook everywhere and filled page after page with vocabulary. At the end of every week, he proudly told me how many words he had learned. The second student was different, right? He learned only 5 new words each day. When the first student heard this, he laughed. He said, 5 words? That is too slow. You will never become fluent. The second student simply smiled and continued with his routine. A few months later, something very interesting happened. The first student had learned hundreds and hundreds of words, but he could remember only a small number of them. The second student had learned fewer words, but he could use almost all of them in conversations. He remembered them clearly. He understood them deeply. He could use them naturally while speaking. One day, the first student looked confused and asked me, "Teacher, how is this possible? I learned so many more words than he did." I smiled and said, "Because learning words is not a race. It is a relationship." Many learners believe that success comes from learning more and more vocabulary every day. They think that if they learn 50 words today, 50 words tomorrow, and 50 more next week, they will quickly become fluent. But the truth is when you try to learn too many words at once, your brain becomes overwhelmed. Imagine someone gives you the names of 50 new people and expects you to remember them all by tomorrow. It would be difficult, but if you meet 5 people and spend time talking to them, you will probably remember them much better. Words work exactly the same way. Your brain needs time to build strong connections. I remember a student who learned the word opportunity. Instead of memorizing the definition and moving on, he spent an entire day with that word. He wrote sentences with it. He spoke it aloud. He used it in conversations. He imagined different situations where he could use it. A few weeks later, he still remembered it perfectly. Another student learned 20 words that same day. A month later, he could barely remember any of them. The difference was not intelligence. The difference was depth. The first student went deep. The second student only went wide. Many English learners are collecting words instead of learning words. They treat vocabulary like stamps or coins. They want bigger and bigger collections. But vocabulary is not about collecting. It is about using. If you know 100 words and can use them confidently, that is often more valuable than knowing 1,000 words that you cannot remember. I once asked a student to tell me about his day. He knew many advanced words, but he could not use them naturally. Then I asked another student who knew fewer words. She spoke clearly and confidently because she truly owned the words she had learned. That was a powerful lesson. Fluency is not measured by how many words you know. Rick Bull. It is measured by how many words you can actually use. This is why successful learners often focus on quality instead of quantity. They learn a small number of words and spend time with them. They read them. They write them. They speak them. They hear them. They use them in real situations. Slowly, those words become permanent parts of their vocabulary. EK. One student once told me something I never forgot. He said, "Teacher, I stopped trying to learn 50 words every day. Instead, I started learning 5 words and using them as much as possible." A few months later, his English improved dramatically. He felt more confident. He remembered more vocabulary. He enjoyed learning again. That is the power of focusing on fewer words and using them deeply. Hey, sometimes, less really is more. But there is still one final secret that separates learners who remember words for years from learners who forget them after a few days. It is a secret that brings together everything we have discussed so far. It is simple, powerful, and available to every English learner in the world. The one thak. In the next chapter, we are going to discover how to make words stay in your memory for a very long time and how to turn vocabulary into a natural part of your daily life. Chapter 6. One day, a student came to me with a big smile on his face. This surprised me because a few months earlier, he had been one of the most frustrated learners I had ever met. Now, Cam. Every week he complained about forgetting words. Every week he told me that his memory was terrible. Every week he thought about giving up. But on this day, something was different. He sat down and said, "Teacher, I finally understand the secret." I smiled and asked him what he meant. He said, "I stopped trying to remember words, and I started trying to use words." That sentence made me very happy, because he had discovered something that many learners never discover. You see, the biggest secret to remembering vocabulary is not memorization. The biggest secret is usage. The words you use become the words you keep. The words you ignore become the words you forget. Think about your own name. Do you ever forget it? Of course not. Why? Because you use it all the time. Think about the names of your family members. You remember them because they are part of your daily life. English words work the same way. The more often a word becomes part of your life, the harder it is to forget. I remember a student who learned the word improve. Instead of writing it once and moving on, she decided to use it everywhere. She wrote sentences with it. She said it during conversations. She used it while talking to herself. She even used it in her journal. A few months later, the word had become completely natural for her. She no longer had to think about it. Paul. Another student learned the same word but only looked at it once in a vocabulary list. A week later, he had already forgotten it. The difference was simple. One student used the word, the other student did not. This is why I always tell my learners that English is not a school subject. It is a skill. Imagine someone who wants to learn how to ride a bicycle. They can read books about bicycles. They can watch videos about bicycles. They can memorize every part of a bicycle. But if they never get on the bicycle and ride it, they will never become good at it. English is exactly the same. You must use it. You must live it. You must make it part of your daily routine. Kang. One student created a simple habit. Every night before sleeping, he chose 3 English words and used them in sentences about his day. It took only a few minutes. Calm. But after several months, his vocabulary grew faster than ever before. Another student started talking to herself in English while walking, cooking, and cleaning. At first, she felt strange, calm. But soon she noticed something amazing. The words she used every day stayed in her memory. They became permanent. I also remember a student who loved reading simple English stories. Okay? Every time he found a new word, he did not rush to learn 10 more. Instead, he focused on that one word. He looked for it in other stories. He listened for it in videos. He used it while speaking. Slowly, his vocabulary became stronger and stronger. The secret was never the number of words he learned. The secret was how often he used them. One day a learner asked me, "Teacher, do successful English speakers ever forget words?" I laughed and said, "Of course they do. Even advanced speakers forget words sometimes. Even native speakers forget words. The difference is that successful learners do not panic when it happens. They simply meet the word again, use it again, and continue learning. Crick. They understand that forgetting is not the end of the journey. It is part of the journey. Throughout this video, we have learned something very important. We learned that forgetting words is normal. K. We learned that memorizing long lists is often ineffective. We learned that repetition makes words stronger. We learned that emotions help memories last longer. Come. We learned that learning fewer words deeply is better than learning many words quickly. And now we have learned the most important lesson of all. Use words if you want to keep them. Enk. Every conversation, every sentence, every story, every moment you spend using English is helping your brain build stronger connections. So the next time you forget a word, do not feel discouraged. Pring. Do not tell yourself that your memory is bad. Do not think that you are failing. Instead, remind yourself that every fluent English speaker once forgot thousands of words. And, the people who succeeded were not the people with perfect memories. They were the people who kept going. They kept reading. They kept listening. They kept speaking. They kept trying. And little by little their vocabulary became stronger. Your journey can be exactly the same. Every word you learn today is a small step forward. But every sentence you speak is progress. Every mistake is a lesson. Reich. Keep moving forward. Keep trusting the process And one day you will look back and realize that the words you once struggled to remember have become a natural part of who you are. Frank. That is how real English fluency is built. One word, one sentence, and one day at a time. If you enjoyed this lesson and learned something new today, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and leave a comment below. Tell me one English word you always forget and one new strategy you will start using after watching this video. I read every comment, and I love hearing about your English journey. Keep learning, keep practicing, and remember this. Every word you remember today brings you one step closer to speaking English with confidence. Confidence. See you in the next video,